Okay, so let us carry on with the topic of the chapter of politics, and the topic is war and terrorism. And we left off talking about some of the sociological definitions or understandings about the causes of war and the objectives of war. And then this slide, it's intended to illustrate some of the costs of war. Obviously, costs money, right? Spend a lot of money, people. And what we mean by morality and mental and emotional well-being is that there are psychological costs to engaging in war, for the people that have to do the killing, that have to do the war, as well as the cultural support that, I mean, for a nation to support their people going to war, we have to have ways of thinking about the enemy that requires psychological adjustment. Specifically, an important term here is dehumanization. We'll talk more, we've talked about dehumanization in the context of race. And to some degree, there's reference to the dehumanization or the objectification when we were talking about women, and certainly women in violence. But it's the idea that people become less human, and if we're going to support dropping bombs on them, we have to see them as less human. The dehumanization examples, of course, are prisoner of war camps, the way the Jews were treated, slavery, and Abu Ghraib, I believe is the way we say that word, which was a prison in Iraq. I think it was in Iraq during the Iraq War. An example of objectifying or dehumanizing people. And the military trains people. There's a lot of investment into helping their soldiers think differently about groups of people, right? It's all about socialization. So terrorism, and again, I am not a war scholar, but let's talk about what we mean by, or what sociologists mean by the definitions here. Terrorism was a way of exercising power, and that's what this chapter is about, power in politics that uses violence or the threat of violence. Suicide terrorism, for our purposes, is defined as the killing of oneself or the killing of others and oneself, all in the name of threatening violence for a political, or so use the term a political goal. And again, by political goal, because politics is about power, it's not necessarily the goal of the government, right? The government is only one way that politics and power is exercised. You can have extra governmental forces like militia groups or like guerrilla. I don't think that's a word, would be the word for it. But certainly, yeah, well, I guess militia is probably where the people organize themselves outside of the government, right? Yeah. Okay. So as I say, suicide, the research on suicide terrorists, often educated, middle class, these are not necessarily marginalized people. But what we mean by becoming radicalized is a term that we use when we're studying militia groups or terrorist groups or any kind of social activism, grassroots. To be radicalized means that you have bought into the philosophy, or you come to understand and agree with the philosophy, and now it's like an extreme form of being mobilized, right? To be radicalized, and now you're willing to die or kill or protest, all in the name of your cause. Targeted killing is a fancy, politically correct way of using the term about assassinations. So that's basically what we mean by a targeted killing. And then another thing, another argument or position, concern about war is how it often sets the seed to future wars. We're hearing that a lot in the popular media these days about Biden's decision to withdraw forces from Afghanistan, and how this is going to create a vacuum, and it will create a space, and the concern that this will in effect sow the seeds of war. And war historians and military historians, could probably outline how this war and left this space in the political economy, and then that led to so and so could step in, and this war became. So that's what they mean by sowing the seeds, the alignments and misalignments. So how by fighting alongside this nation, it now puts you at odds with this nation. Or even when I think we talked about it in a previous chapter, we talked about selling resources, selling military equipment to one government now means they have the tools they need to fight against you. So it's all this sowing the seeds of future war. Yeah, there it is right there, selling war technology. And then the last slide is an idea called the New World Order. And thinking back 2 chapters ago, I don't actually remember how many chapters ago, but thinking back to the chapter on global stratification, where we were talking about, not that one, but we were talking about the concentric zone theory of world systems theory. And in the middle, you have your core nations, and then you have your semi-periphery nations, and you have your periphery nations. And I use the analogy, it's sort of like the popular kids and the kind of popular kids, and then the not at all even known kids. What we mean by the New World Order, it's the shifting of which nations are in the middle, the shifting of the nations that have the hegemonic power, the shifting of the nations that the rest of the world pays attention to. And so the idea is that who is in charge, I don't want to say the word not who is in charge, but who has global influence or the hegemonic power, is based on either military force or economic force. And if you know anything about world history, how Rome dominated and then Rome fell, and then Europe dominated, and then Germany. I mean, that's part of what the whole dividing of Warsaw was, or East and West Germany, was to create a new world order. So this is what this is about, is it's shifting. And the assumption is, or concern, I don't know what word you want to use, consumption, concern, anticipation, right? The change, it appears that the changes include the economic rise of China, and perhaps the decline of the United States. And then some are also acknowledging how the ongoing information warfare, or the use of technological terrorism, not technological, but information terrorism, may be coming out of Russia. And that's what that phrase means. The New World Order is things are shifting, and we are witnessing them in our life. But it's also true that the world has always shifted. It's just a matter of, when you're at the top, you want to stay at the top, and that's a bit uncomfortable for nation states that have been at the top. Okay, that ends this chapter, the chapter on politics. Politics is defined by the use and distribution of power. Thank you for listening.